Hello and welcome. Today I wanted to do a quick review of the newest product from Kyberlight Sabers. What I have here in front of me is the Kyberlight Black Crackle blade. Now, if you're looking for commentary on the history or politics of this blade, this is not that video. Today I wanted to do a blind review of the features of this blade and the design to show you a little bit about what it is and whether or not it might be something that you're interested in. Now, a couple things about the features before I plug this thing in. You'll notice that this has a bullet tip, much like other Kyberlight Sabers. Unlike other Kyberlight Sabers, though, this bullet tip is fused in there, so it's not like freely unscrewable like the other ones that they have are, but it's kind of fused in there, fused in place. The blade is black with what they call a proprietary lightning pattern. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. It is a thick-walled, undiffused blade. So much like all of the other blades from Kyberlight, except for the fact that we've got a tip that's set in place, and we've got this black blade with a lightning pattern. Let me go ahead and fire up the saber and show you what this looks like with various colors. And start off with a white. Alright, so you can notice the overall effect of it is kind of interesting. As a day blade, you get this nice sort of sleek black. It's pretty shiny. If you look close enough, you can see the lightning details as a day blade, but they don't really come out until you run the light through it. As a lit blade, it creates that sort of mottled effect, a lava sort of effect, or an ice sort of effect. It's the same thing that I've shown before in a different blade that I'll talk about in the next video. But for right now, it creates sort of a varied effect as the light travels down the blade. Brighter at the base, dimmer at the hilt, but with that sort of cracked effect, hence Crackle blade. Alright, so a couple things about what this blade does well, and then we'll look at the neutrals, and then we'll look at the negatives. Things that it does well. It is really interesting as a day blade. Let me go ahead and get a little bit more light in here so that you can see the detail. So as a day blade, it has a very nice jet black look to it. Again, I said you can't really see the lightning unless you're up close. But from afar, it has an interesting black blade appeal, and it's a shiny black. When it's lit, you notice the lightning a little bit more in the light there. So things that this thing does well. Works really well as a day blade with the light off, just spinning around like this, bright or in direct sunlight. Other interesting things about this. I actually like the tip quite a bit on this. The fact that it's fused down means that with the other Kyberlight blades, if you didn't affix it yourself, it would eventually loosen up and you'd have to screw it back down again. That is not the case on this. The tip illumination is actually pretty dang good. If you can see this, it's got a shine-through tip, so the light comes all the way down and illuminates all the way out. Okay, light diffusion isn't bad on this. Again, it's brighter here, darker here, but with the mottled effect, that actually works pretty well. It is thick-walled, so it's fairly durable. An interesting thing about the Kyberlight, though, if you scratch the base here, as this thing has been scratched by a different lightsaber that I had this in, the black will scratch. So the black is a surface level on top of what is otherwise a trans-white blade. Let me go ahead and show you that scratch up close. My hope is that you could see some of the lines in there that didn't look to be going the same direction as the regular lightning. So if you scratch it, it will scratch through the black. Now that creates more lightning as long as the direction is fine, but otherwise it can create a little bit of a mar. The Kyberlight blades are interestingly soft in a lot of ways, which is how they can manage their lifetime guarantee on them, because they are prone to dent, but they won't really break unless something very extreme happens to them. The material is a little bit softer than a standard blade, so when it does scratch that, it takes quite a bit of work to do it. So good thing about it, durable, interesting as a day blade, good tip, and good tip illumination. All right, now let me talk about the neutrals. All right, so neutral things on this. Again, this blade is not diffused. Now with the black blade, you don't necessarily need the diffusion quite as much. You can diffuse it yourself. I've got a tutorial video on how to do that. The main problem that I have with this one being undiffused is that when it hits on things, or when you're carrying it around, it has sort of a cheap, hollow feel without that diffusion in. Really hard to explain, but okay, you can kind of hear that cheap, hollow sound. It's more of a dull sound when you're dealing with a blade that's diffused, simply because the diffusion sort of takes out some of that hollow echo that you get with an undiffused blade. So that's the same with any blade that you have, but with this one, it's kind of a neutral. It has sort of that weird hollow sound unless you stick some diffusion film in there. So other neutrals on this is the color of the die. Now you notice that when I ran the blade through that, or ran the light through this, all right, we get sort of this uniform gray throughout, with a little bit lighter gray in the lightning. All right, now different black dyes that have been used on other products have a little bit more color complexity to them. This is printed on top of the blade, so it's kind of uniform. That's kind of a neutral. It's not as complicated and intricate as it could be, but again, it is what it is. All right, so neutrals. The color and the hollow sound. Negatives on this blade. Now I've got two main ones. One of them is the lightning pattern itself. Now they describe this as their proprietary lightning pattern. I'm going to go ahead and give you a close-up, and I want you to look very carefully at the lightning bolts themselves. So two things I'm hoping that you noticed there. One is the detail of the pattern. Since this is a black lightning pattern printed on top of one of their blades, it's printed fairly well, I mean, in terms of depth and durability. But if you notice the edges of the lightning bolts, you're going to notice a little bit of pixelation from the resolution that they used in order to create this pattern. That image could have been sharper, could have given that lightning bolt a little bit of a smoother look as opposed to that strange pixelation. The other thing that I'm hoping that you noticed was the seam. Because this is printed, there is a seam where the image stopped because it's not a repeating image. So there's a line all the way down the blade where the lightning pattern doesn't quite match across. Now that's up close and on inspection, that is a negative. From a distance, like I said, as a day blade, you don't notice it. But if you look close, within about 5 or 6 feet, you will see that seam if you're looking for it. So that's definitely a negative for me. A pattern that actually repeated or matched up on the edges would have been probably a lot more difficult to accomplish, but it would have made a world of difference on this. All right, so basically that's the features of this thing. Positives, negatives, neutral points. One last thing I wanted to cover was the price, which strictly speaking is a positive point on this. This is more expensive than a standard saber blade. I think Kyberlight blades are like $20, I believe. This one is $50 because they're printing on it. If you get a day blade from some other manufacturers, $40 to $50 for a blade is actually not that unreasonable. Really, classy high-end blades, you could end up paying $100 to $150 for a blade. So $50 is actually a fairly low price point for something like this. But again, you get what you pay for. This is more interesting than a standard blade, less interesting than some of the premium blades, but it definitely does make a statement, especially if you put some film in it to get rid of that sort of hollow sound. So this has been the black Crackle blade from Kyberlight. If you are interested in taking a look at this, I'll go ahead and put a link down in the description. Hopefully this has helped you see what this is so that you can make a more informed decision. I will be shooting another review with this blade, sort of comparing it to something very similar within the market. So that'll be the next video, and if you are interested, please join me back for that one. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.